Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Today I am going to be reviewing a travel watercolor set from a company called Grabie. And before we get to a little bit about Grabie, I just want to say that I have both the review of this watercolor set as well as a painting that is a word art for wintertime at the end of the review. So if you just want to see some painting, you can go ahead and skip to that. So just a tad about Grabie before we get started. Their website is Grabie.cc, and I appreciated their philosophy on their Our Story page. So I have worked with them in the past on a washi tape video, and I agreed to work with them again on this watercolor video. Full disclosure, they did send the set to me for free, and I will be an affiliate with them. So if you use any of the links, which I will link you up to everything, their site, and this watercolor set, and a perpetual 15% off coupon that is good on anything forever. I will make a small commission if you use those links, and that helps support this channel. So let's go ahead and dive into this watercolor set. So here is what the package looks like when it comes in the mail, and it is pretty hefty when you lift it up. So it is a substantial watercolor set. It's non-toxic. It has 12 colors in it. It says it's great for all levels of artists, which I will tell you, I am not an artist, but I am artful, and anyone can be artful. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. It is taped shut, and as I look at the back, it tells you all the pieces that come in this set, and we'll go over those as we get to each piece. When you open up the box, all the pieces are contained in this handy little carrying bag. It's made out of cloth and it seems very sturdy, so it should last a good long time. There is a lovely bonus paint swatch chart in there that you can swatch out your colors. And there is this little watercolor pad. Just a little note here, as I was opening up the watercolor paper pad, I noticed that the binding was a little sticky to the plastic, and I was a little worried about that, but as I started pulling sheets out of this little pad, I didn't have any issues with it. In fact, hardly any of that binding stayed adhered to the edge of the paper when I removed it, so that was really good, and there are 12 little sheets in that pad. And just so you know, that very top sheet is not watercolor paper, it's just a cover. So you can use that as scratch paper, which you'll see me do a little bit later. And you can see me pulling out the other bits and pieces. And what I found really fun was this watercolor brush. Now, it took me a moment to figure out how it worked. I wasn't sure if it pulled apart or unscrewed, and I figured out that it unscrews, and then when you reverse it and screw it back into itself, then you've got a handle. And when you put this thing away, you can protect your bristles inside of that handle. So I think that is a clever design. And here is the pan of paints itself, and then our permanent marker. I thought at first that this was a ballpoint pen, but it is kind of a felt tip pen that has a flexible nib, and I really like that for doing kind of calligraphy style. Now, I am definitely not, like I said, I'm not an artist or a calligrapher, but I do play. And so having that flexible tip helps you get wider and thinner strokes when you're drawing, and that is a very good design. So when I opened up this tin, I noticed it was kind of rattling around inside, and I wasn't sure why that was, but it turns out that the paints are clipped into a separate tray, and so it was that tray rattling inside this can. Now, I should say here that my experience with watercolor has always been with tube paints that I fill into my own separate palette, so I've never used these pre-made pans of watercolor paint. So I will have fun playing with this as a new product to me as well. Now you can see off in the distance I am playing with that graphite pencil. It did come packaged in this little green case, but that is not a storage case. I think that was just to protect it in shipping, and so I had to remove that and toss it aside. But that pencil works very well. It erases nicely with the eraser that's included. I often will pre-draw an image when I'm watercoloring and then erase it down to just barely being able to see it to give myself a guide. So now you can see here I am playing with these paints, and each pan does clip out of this central tray and pops back in. So potentially in the future, these could be replaceable. One of the things about pans of paint that I've always worried about is running out of one particular color and then having to buy an entirely new set to replace them. So I don't know off the top of my head right now if they do have replacements, but I will go check out their website and pop it up on the screen if I can find the answer to that. So I am going to start off my watercolor experience with this palette by playing, and that's what I like to do whenever I get new colors of paint is to play with them. And I noticed that some of the colors had dust on them from other colors, so I wanted to wipe that away before I swatch these colors out so that I can get the cleanest, purest colors possible. I'm not going to make you watch me do all the swatching, but I will say here that this color is called Payne's Gray, and depending on the manufacturer, it can be more gray, but this one tends to be more blue. And I'm actually kind of used to that because my other paint palette has a blue or a Payne's gray, but that helps to deepen colors. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. As you can see, I'm playing with this paint in various ways. I'm seeing what the consistency is like, what the texture is like, how translucent the paint is. That is what I'm doing with these permanent black lines on here. One is just a Sharpie marker, and that other thinner line is from the pen in this kit. And playing with this pen a little bit more, I find that it is instantly waterproof. So I grabbed the paint and painted right over that line as soon as I drew it, and it is definitely waterproof, so you can draw right before painting with these. Here I am doing a glazing, which is helping me understand how these colors will interact with each other because they are translucent. That is the beauty of watercolor paints. You will see the color underneath through the color on top, and that changes and shifts the colors. And that can also lead to color mixing down the line, which, like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more. With some basic swatching out of the way, I am doing an ombre paint now. So I am starting off with a full concentration of color, and then I dip my brush in water just to dilute the paint that's already on the brush. And I continue with that paint stroke to give myself an ombre effect. And these paints worked lovely for doing that. As I keep playing here, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with the pans of paint. I found that they were highly pigmented, which is what you want in a watercolor. I also found that the pans themselves were a bit sticky. So I am not familiar, like I said, with pans of paint. That stickiness probably comes from the binding agent used to hold the pigment into that cake shape. And so you really do want to pick up your color from the pan and spread it out onto the palette, which the lids fold open to give you some palette space, and then use your paint from that palette onto your projects. Otherwise, the sticky quality of the pans will create a concentrated color on the tip of your brush, which can interfere with what you're trying to get out of this color. So just a little bit here, I am testing out the watercolor paper in this pad by seeing how much the paint will spread and flow into each other. And I did find that the paper dries fairly quickly, so I didn't get a lot of flow and spread with this color. And I'm doing this test in a couple of different ways. And so I was a little disappointed with that just because I really like when the colors naturally bleed together when I'm painting. And because I don't paint a lot of imagery, I do a lot of just random abstract styles, specifically for my scrapbook pages, but I do enjoy painting little imagery every once in a while. So you can see I'm playing with that. All right, here is where I'm starting to work with color mixing. Now this palette only has 12 colors in it, and these colors are pretty vibrant. I prefer actually toned down colors with more of a gray base to them. And that is part of what that Payne's Gray paint in there does. It helps cool down, tone down, deepen those colors. So you can see that I'm often mixing the pure hues with some of that Payne's Gray to get another shade of color. So you can see I've done that with the reds, the pinks, the blues. And then notice that this green this is called sap green, and it's a very kind of vibrant green. And if you're painting imagery with leaves and flowers, you're going to want various shades of green. So you can add blue to this, you can add Payne's Gray to this, and you can change up those shades of green to get lots of variety. So don't feel like 12 colors isn't enough, because you can really do a lot with all of these colors as long as you start mixing your colors. And that's part of what that glazing chart that I did earlier was all about, is to kind of see, get a feel for how these colors start interacting and behaving with each other. All right, now that I've had fun playing with that paint, let's go ahead and create a project. I am using that graphite pencil to give myself some lines to create some words. So I have a top line, a bottom line, and then a center line because I'm going to make 2 rows of words. And I am just going to draw them out or write them out by hand at first. And I was counting out how many letters in my words so I could figure out where the center is to generally get it centered. You'll see later that it's not perfect, but I'm okay with that. Once I have the words drawn out, then I will trace around those lines to give myself some wide letters, so kind of block letter style. I come back in, I erase that central line that I created to start my letters. I erase the top line, bottom line, and the center line so that those won't show up in my final painting. And then I will lighten up all of those lines so that you can just barely see them, so that I can just barely see them, but they will give me some guide to getting these letters tidy when I'm painting. All right, and now we are ready to put paint to paper. I am mixing up a darker shade of pink using some of that Payne's gray so that I can have some depth to the colors that I'm painting for these letters. So I'm starting off with a base coat of the solid hue of the color and then adding in just touches of that darker color here and there, mostly to the bottom of the letters to help weigh the letters down, make them feel more solid and grounded. And I'm going to use a purple toned down with that Payne's gray again for the second word and also adding in that darker shade to the bottom of those letters. And then for the rest of the painting, I am going to kind of divide it up into thirds and do kind of an ombre painting. So the top third will be the lightest blue in this paint palette. And I will start off with a deeper color towards the bottom of that third mark and then lighten it up just with clean water. As I move from the bottom to the top with my paintbrush, I will re-dip in clean water and just pull that color and drag that color up. And down here at the bottom is a mix of Payne's gray with that mid-range blue. And I let that dry completely, and I'm going to finish off this little project with that pen that is included here. And I'm just doing a sketchy outline to all of these letters to give them kind of that fun and funky feel. And I will add some little doodled snowflakes to this. And there you have it. I am done with a simple little project for wintertime. Off camera, I did keep playing with this paint palette and I created a few things, including a little wreath that I've been practicing with some of my small imagery painting, and so that was fun to play with. Now, before we go, I want to give you just a couple more final thoughts on this palette. When I was using this brush, I felt like it fit my hand very well. It was very nice to use. It had a nice sharp tip to it, so I could get fat strokes or thin strokes. The only downside to this brush is that the base of the bristles hold a lot of water. So if you load up just the tip of your brush, you can get that water squishing out and diluting your paint as you go. So make sure you either dry off your brush on a towel or be careful when you're loading up your paintbrush that you load completely to the base of these bristles so that you don't get that diluting effect from this brush. And one other small thing that I had a little bit of a hard time with this set was the kind of small space for mixing colors on the palette. Now you can remove the central tray of pans and have more mixing space in there, which I definitely needed. But with those two small negatives aside, I think this is a great paint set and it would be awesome for beginners or for people who want to travel with their watercolors, and I definitely recommend it. So if you want to check out more about this paint set, head on over to Grabie. And while you're there, you can see what other lovely, fun, crafty goodies they have. So that is it for this time. Let me know what you think about this paint set. And until I see you next time, I do hope you have an artful day.